Education, now accessible and inexpensive through games and technology. A freshman in college, approximately 18 years old, would find themselves the same age as Google. Founded in 1998, Google has grown to become one of the most influential companies in the world, to the point that we use the company name as a verb. Googling something is a cornerstone of many millennials' education. Not understanding a math problem, or can't figure out what the themes in Shakespeare's Hamlet are? Just Google it. We've all heard it before. Yet even these implications are only being slowly applied into classrooms. Many teachers grew up and were taught without tools such as the internet to find and access media on the fly. And that's why those that have grown up with these ways of learning are becoming influencers in the ever-changing landscape of education. So, where are we going in, say, the next 15 years? Apps that teach. Terry Hike, founder and writer of TeachThought.com, has a few ideas. One of which is the idea of apps becoming the new textbook.
I've always had a fascination for computers and technology, and I made a few apps for the iPhone, iPod Touch, and iPad. I'd like to share a couple with you today.
His article discusses how apps revolve around close study, diving into niche specifics of topics that textbooks only skim. Further, he explains that apps frequently revolve around gaming or social experiences, tying individuals together in a desire to overcome their friends. Games like Trivia Crack seem to utilize this notion, giving players time to challenge their friends and family in specific categories in the classic game of Who Knows More. However, this isn't the type of game that I believe Heck is referring to. Busu is an app that teaches language through brief micro-lessons, through the form of text, audio, and pictures. The program follows a similar structure to Jim G's principle of system thinking, in that, to progress to the next tier of learning the language, one must complete the beginner courses. Only through systematically reducing the scope of the problem can the learner progress to harder challenges. For Spanish, you'll begin with greetings and basic questions, which seem fairly straightforward and easy. However, as you progress, you must apply those words into complete sentences with newer vocabulary, typically surrounded by a theme, similar to how video game levels revolve around themes. An example being Green Hill Zone in Sonic the Hedgehog, which is similar to the type of language you'll find in the vacation section of learning Spanish. Programming can also be taught in a similar tier-like structure. Apps, such as Learn C++, begin with the basics of a topic. Interestingly enough, both of these are languages. And from that beginning knowledge, you'll find yourself applying those skills to lower levels of coding. These apps are incredibly intuitive, enjoyable, and allow skills that normally would be taught by a professor to be learned at the tempo of a singular student. What Heck doesn't acknowledge in his article is the fact that these apps, in effect, become far more accessible and cost-efficient than the traditional learning methods. An introductory Spanish textbook can average near $100. If, and this is important, a student has access to a phone or computer, their access to learning this topic is free, giving them an immense amount of freedom in dictating their learning. Further, the learning is exceptionally interactive. For Busu, students are required to write, read, listen, and even say the words that are being described in the app, with real-time feedback. A textbook is great at providing space for examples, but requires a facilitator to give any personal feedback. It would not surprise me, with the push for public schools to provide students with iPads and/or laptops, that app-based learning will become far more relevant. Learning instruments. Apps may be great at teaching languages, but can they also teach physical tasks, such as piano or guitar? In short, yes. Through similar gamified elements, games such as Rocksmith and apps such as Noda, individuals can have their learning broken down into the essential building blocks with immediate feedback if they are missing a note, string, or chord, similar to how Busa uses feedback with its language program. Problem-based learning. Classroom, ideally, should be a sandbox for students to learn and develop skills with one another. Whether that's patience, turn-taking, or public speaking, the roles of a traditional classroom are certainly essential for developing a child's social skills. However, what about math? Computer programming? Where do children get to experience and actively engage in experimentation with chemicals and forces? These are frequently absent from traditional lecture-based classrooms. Games allow students the ability to transcend
Hello and welcome Today we have Build It Bob as the test subject for the shrinking experiment to see what's inside the human body.
Say, for example, a child wants to break apart dangerous compounds and chemicals that they deal with in their everyday life. Minecraft is a great example of a game that allows experimentation and exploration, such as cactus can be lit on fire, but sand cannot. Why is that? Krisha Caprell, an author for Scholastic.com, argues that Minecraft is a perfect example of a game that can make students ask questions about why things react and work together. She focuses on how Minecraft can be used to understand history, having students research places and locations, such as a battle in the Civil War or the Eiffel Tower in Paris, and present their recreations with information pertaining to how the structure seen occurred in history.
Let's move on to ribosomes, which are like all over the cell.
Further, we've alluded to Vygotsky's zone of proximal development being relevant when playing Minecraft, as players have to interact and engage with others to learn more about how to build and progress in this wide-open game. Daniel Short, writer of Teaching Scientific Concepts Using a Virtual World, believes that there are several capabilities of games such as Minecraft to enhance student awareness for topics such as ecology, geography, geology, and physics. Perhaps the most surprising was that Minecraft also can teach students about the human body.
After that, we go into the small intestines and then into the large intestines. Unfortunately, we cannot go into the small intestines or we'll rip Bob open and that will not be good. So after the small intestines, we go into the large. It goes into the large intestines, and then the leftover food from the large intestines gets pushed out through the rectum.
Multiple students spawn inside a massive human body and have to traverse the body, defeating a number of germs and dangers in an attempt to save the body from getting sick. It sounds a tad far-fetched, but the idea that students would have to call to others where they are in the body and use specific terminology to locate where other students would be is a phenomenal way to promote biology to younger students. Operant conditioning and Skinner box test chambers.
The irony is you were almost at the last test.
Perhaps my favorite example out of all of these applications is that of Valve's first-person shooter, Portal 2. Portal 2 is a map maker tool that lets players design their own test chamber, giving creative freedom to the player. Valve went the extra step though. They've created a number of different lesson plans revolving around Portal 2, all free on a site called teachwithportals.com. There are a handful of lesson plans for math, physics, and game design, but they even have a lesson plan on narrative. Portal 2 is an exemplary game, not solely because it's fun and requires problem-solving behavior, but because it subverts itself into the behaviorist mentality of games that I discussed in my last side quest. While I critique this in most first-person shooters, Valve has gone meta with their story. You run around in what are basically Skinner boxes, Skinner being the theorist behind operant conditioning. The reward is achieved sooner if you get through the problem faster, and in this case the reward is the advancement in an amazing story with numerous character arcs and a few surprises along the way.
Well, this is the part where you kills us.
Hello, this is the part where I kill you. Had a bit of a brainwave. There I was, smashing some steel plates together, and I thought to myself, yeah, it's deadly. But what's missing? What's missing? And I thought lots of sharp bits welded onto the front.
Back to Valve's lesson plan, the focus is on these character developments and why players are invested in the characters. Seems a bit metacognitive, huh? This may seem inconsequential, but what Valve is doing, and this speaks to what numerous designers are doing, is showing why people are invested in their games, and teaching students how to make more compelling ones.
Oh, you came back. I didn't plan for this. Can't reset a death trap. Oh, could you just jump into that pit? Would you just jump into that pit for me? Would you just jump into that pit?
Games to invest in.
That deadly pit. You're saying to yourself, why should I jump in the pit? I'll tell you why. Guess who's down there? Your parents! You're not adopted after all.
Games have a tremendous capability at creating agency through story, social interaction, and player choice, as discussed with both Portal and Minecraft. An experiment by several NCSU students detailed whether player agency was important in games and found, clearly, that it was. What it also found was that most players have a preference for content that results in a linear story. This is interesting, as several large games such as Fallout New Vegas and the Witcher series revolve around decisions that impact large portions of the game. Players, at least in this experiment, failed to grasp the scope of the majority of their decisions, and thus a simpler, linear story with smaller moments of user agency would promote stronger games. Again, this is all according to the study.
You've got yacht and boys. Loads of boys, fellas, hunky guys.
What is applicable from a games and learning standpoint is that games don't have to be massive undertakings to create player agency. This means that games can create agency on a small scale and still be relevant to students.
Oh, wow, good. I didn't think that was going to work.
Conclusion. Games and applications are mainstream, so much so that there are sex-defining casual and hardcore players. Some games, like Minecraft and Portal, can transcend these titles and create learning experiences through their interactive sandboxes for students to grow and engage with one another. Applications such as Busu and Noda give users immediate feedback for how to better learn skills and incite motivation through gamified leveling systems. Finally, developers don't need extensive budgets to create experiences that others can learn and grow from. Students have the freedom to get apps that allow them to design apps, and to apps that teach them to design apps, and apps that teach them the language to design apps. Players can now find themselves invested in topics that would have required out-of-date textbooks and professors to explain the content to them. Now, they have access to tons of free content across the web. Though, there is a catch, one that may or may not be resolved in the next 15 years. What about those without an internet connection? As learning progresses, the availability of these resources will definitely become open to one and all. It's merely a matter of time.
On trying to create a cell network in Minecraft that can connect out into the real world. It sounds totally out there and pretty hard to envision without seeing it, so let me show it to you. First things first, we have to craft a cell phone. The way we do that is by surrounding a white stained glass pane in some iron, and there we go. We've got a cell phone. Browse the web and make video calls. So the way we get this thing going is we'll fly up into the air and we'll simply drop it. And now we've got this cell phone here, but you'll notice we can't do anything with it yet because if we hit the button here, we've